Mistakes were made. Hey all, and welcome to my channel. My name is Erin, and this is my first Booktube video. I'm going to be sprinkling in some content that falls a little bit outside of AuthorTube, and I hope that you will enjoy coming on this journey with me. I've been wanting to read more, and I figured that doing a video on it would be one way to light a fire under my butt so I could get it done. Today I want to talk about two books by Amelia Atwater-Rhodes, specifically Hawksong and Bloodwitch. I'm pitting my favorite YA ever against the start of the latest series by my favorite author. Let's see who comes out on top. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and ring that bell so you always know when a new video is uploaded. For those of you unfamiliar, Amelia Atwater-Rhodes is a fantasy author who published their first book at 14 in 1999 and was hailed as the teen successor to Anne Rice. They came out as queer in 2009 when they got engaged to their partner, and they also converted to Judaism in 2013. Hawksong is Amelia Atwater-Rhodes' fifth book, and it has been my favorite book since I read it 17 years ago. I hadn't read anything else from her in the last decade, and I decided it was finally time to change that. I decided to read the first installment of their most recently published YA series, which is Bloodwitch, their 15th novel. I will give you a brief rundown of each of the books before we get too deep. I'll talk about what I liked, what I think needs improvement, and how they compare. I have a lot of feelings, so buckle up. Hawksong is a YA fantasy that was published in 2003. The main players are Danica and Zane. They are both shapeshifters and both heirs to warring nations who desperately want to bring peace to their people. Cue the suggestion from a neutral third party that Danica and Zane get married to force peace to happen. Their families and nations are not super fond of this idea, but they are just desperate enough to actually consider it. And they push forward with the marriage despite protests from all sides. Hawksong is the first book in the HERA series, which is 5 books long and takes us through multiple different cultures, including the Serpent, the Avians, the Wolfpacks, and the Falcons. Bloodwitch published in 2014 and is also a YA fantasy. It blends the two different worlds that Amelia Atwater-Rhodes has been writing, including the HERA and the Den of Shadows, which is her vampire novels. Prior to reading this, I did not know that the HERA and Den of Shadows were in the same universe, and after reading it, I desperately wished that they were not. Our main player in Bloodwitch is Vance. He is a Quetzal that has been raised by vampires to be absolutely loyal to them. They raised him in captivity in the hopes that when he was grown, he would be loyal enough that they could use his magic to their advantage. What did I like about Hawksong? Hawksong is an absolutely exquisite exploration of the enemies to lovers trope. The leads come from warring nations, so obviously the beginnings of their relationship is extremely rocky, but their dedication to peace is what holds them together. And through their time together, they start to learn about one another and the people behind the legends and stories that have so long colored their opinions of one another. The cultures in Hawksong are so beautifully developed and the world building is so well done that I am still in love with these characters and these cultures 17 years later. What did I like about Bloodwitch? Am I a terrible person if I say I liked nothing? I was really expecting to like this book because in general, I do really enjoy all of Atwater-Rhodes' books. And if I hadn't been reading this for a video, I would have DNF'd it very early on, and honestly, I regret ever picking it up. The main character is passive and boring until about the last 3 chapters. The world building is lackluster, everyone feels pretty one-dimensional, and the links to the HERA books that we do get in Bloodwitch pissed me off at every goddamn turn. I could see a similar quality in the writing style that I'm familiar with Atwater-Rhodes, but that was really only the good thing I can say about this. What do I think needs improvement? One of the issues that I do have consistently through Atwater-Rhodes' books is the names of things, whether that is people or places. I think the reason for this is because they published their first book at 14 and are still writing in the exact same universe. So they are stuck with all of the names that their tween self came up with. These are things to consider if you plan on publishing a series when you're young. Do you really want to be 35 and stuck with a character named Mistress Jessica, ruler of the Empire of Midnight? I love their writing style, but my goodness, do the names yoink me out of the story sometimes. So let's talk about the MC of Bloodwitch a little. Vance is the white bread of main characters. Prior to the start of the book, Vance is raised in complete ignorance of the world. He is 100% loyal to the vampires and wouldn't even think of doing anything that they wouldn't want him to do. He flat out said that if they asked him to die, He wouldn't think twice about it and would accept because he is so grateful to them. Additionally, his characterization kind of whiplashes around for me, where he goes from being super loyal to the vampires and totally unafraid, to then being so terrified he feels the need to leave after one of the vampires loses their shit. Given the inclination of said vampire to bouts of violence, I find it very difficult to believe that this is the first time Vance has ever seen him act this way. Twice in the book, he sees a young slave child with said vampire covered in bruises because the vampire beat him for impertinence. I'm supposed to believe that Vance has never seen this vampire be a dickwad before in the last 14 years. If that vampire is so willing to smack around a 5-year-old slave for impertinence, I find it very difficult to believe that Vance as a child was so well behaved and well mannered that he was never once annoying to this vampire. It just did not feel believable for me that he went 14 years never witnessing violence from this character, and then suddenly that's all we know about him. It's really only for the last 3 chapters that Vance gets remotely interesting, and the entire rest of the book he's manipulated by anyone and everyone. And please note, I'm not saying that characters like this are bad or that they can't be done well, but in this case, Vance was not done well for me. Compare this to Zane and Danica, who are both active participants in their story. They defy their families and pursue one another in the name of peace. They come from diametrically opposed cultures, and they are weaving around assassination attempts, culture shock, personal fears, and so much more. They have developed friends and family and conflicts to work through. And that feels so much more engaging to me than your conflict being that the people who raised you did it for a purpose besides love. Again, I do think that that could potentially be an interesting story, but Bloodwitch fell flat for me. Vance doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have anything interesting going on around him. He was raised in a greenhouse with zero knowledge about anything. And his internal conflict is often so mild that I really wish he was a secondary character instead. Malachi Obsidian, who is a secondary character in this book, would have been a much better choice for a lead. Malachi is part Serpient and part Falcon, which if you have read the Kishara, you will know that this is an extremely dangerous and unstable combination. Malachi has struggled, he has trauma, he has intense motivations, and it would have been so much more entertaining to follow his story. In terms of the world building, in Hawksong we have the Avians and the Serpient. The Avians are a matriarchy ruled by the Thule Thea. And I don't know if I say that right, I have never known how to pronounce it, but we're just gonna go with it. They're a reserved society that values composure and politeness above expression. Touch is uncommon except between parents and children or between pair bonds, but even then, doing that in public is not common. They love music and artistry, and they're all vegetarian due to a quirk from a previous ruler. Compare this to the Serpient, who are fierce and expressive with a deep love of dance and beauty. They are a patriarchy ruled by their diente, but are otherwise a pretty egalitarian society. They are constantly touching and often sleep in big piles like cats just for the comfort of proximity. Both cultures are cut off from their inherent magic except for their ability to shapeshift. With Bloodwitch, we get very little world building because Vance doesn't know anything about anything. We go from a vampire estate home where Vance lives in a greenhouse to a vampire compound called Midnight Proper, which is where Mistress Jessica lives. This book focuses heavily on slavery, which made it a pretty squeamish read. The slaves are there to do chores and to be fed on, and are composed of both humans and shapeshifters from conquered nations. There are specific vampires that we're introduced to called trainers, and a trainer's job is to basically destroy the free will of a new slave. Many of the slaves are born and raised in Midnight and don't need to be given to the trainers to be broken because they are raised not knowing anything different. The slaves are basically zombies who have no opinions about anything and wouldn't even consider doing anything other than exactly what they're told. We know almost nothing about the rest of the world, and the things that we do know make me very upset. So, spoiler alert if you have not read the Kishara series, because I need to spoil the ending of this so that you will understand how deeply upset Bloodwitch made me. In Hawksong, we have the tentative blending of the two cultures. The people are hesitant because of their shared violent history, but it goes surprisingly well. In Snake Charm, the second book, it gets even better. And by the time Wolfcry rolls around, we have a completely blended capital, and the people have been at peace for about 2 decades. At this point, Zane and Danica's daughter Eliza runs off with her wolf girlfriend, and they make the decision to pass the thrones on to Danica's younger sister and Zane's nephew, both of which have been completely raised in peace and are presumably going to keep things that way. Everything in that series leaves you with hope that it's gonna be okay. Fast forward to Bloodwitch, which is supposedly set about 1,000 years later, and the 5 books of the Kishara might as well not even exist. The avians, I can only assume, are completely enslaved by the vampires because in the compound we meet a hawk named Alistair. The hawks are the ruling shifters within the avians, and there's no reason that one of their hawks would be there unless their culture was totally conquered. We also meet HERA, the current Serpient princess who must travel to Midnight in order to pay tribute and bend the knee. It's stated in the book that the Cobriana, who are the ruling family of the Serpients, are still in power, but are conquered vassal kings, and that they have returned to a state of war with the avians. The Serpient are also still in active conflict with the Obsidian Guild. For some context, Maeve was the first Serpient shifter ever. She's the one who got them their magic and their ability to change shape. But it was Keisha, the first Cobra, who ended up being the first of the ruling line. The White Vipers are still mad about this 2,000 years later. The fact that the avians and the Serpient have returned to war is just depressing to me. Like, what the fuck was the point of even writing the Kishara if this is what you were gonna do? Why go through 5 books of mending these cultures together just to destroy it all in another book with some throwaway lines 10 years later? One of the vampires in the books flat out states that the avians and the Serpient have always been at war, and I'm just kind of sitting there like, what about the 5-book series where they were not? I don't know if the vampire was lying for no reason because Vance knows nothing about any of the history of their world, or if the author somehow forgot her own books, but in either case, I don't like it. Also, for more context, the Falcons are a separate kingdom who are very long-lived and extremely powerful. They are the ones who destroyed the magic of the avians and the Serpient and rent it in two, putting half into each of the different cultures. Then they started the war so that they would never reunite and regain access to that magic. If they ever had children together, the magic would reestablish itself and become more potent and stable as the generations progressed. The vampires state that the reason the avians and Serpient were conquered by them is because they don't have magic users. I'm supposed to believe that in the last 1,000 years, coming out of a culture that was at peace for at minimum 2 decades, that there is not a single mixed avian Serpient child, and that none of those children ever had children? I don't know. Seems unrealistic to me. If you have read and loved Hawksong, I do not recommend reading Bloodwitch. I mean, I don't recommend it anyways, but I especially don't recommend it if you actually like the Kishara. If you do decide to read Bloodwitch, I am giving you a trigger warning because a character commits pretty graphic suicide fairly early on in the book. I regret reading Bloodwitch, and I honestly don't know if I will ever pick up another book by this author again. I will always keep recommending Hawksong. If you have not read it yet, please do so. I'll put a link below to the book and to Bloodwitch as well, just in case you think I am full of lies. So that is all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching my contemporary romance novel Heart and Soul, as well as my other 2 books, Olympian Confessions, Hades and Persephone, and Olympian Confessions, HERA, are all available on sale right now. You can check out the first 3 chapters of all of them on my website. Links will be below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to be notified as soon as I upload, then ring that bell. All my social media links will be in the description below, and I will see you all next week with another video. Bye!